We engaged with the Soviets all over the planet. Both sides thought that almost every area of the world or every region of the world was worth fighting over. And the end result of that is that the United States got involved in wars in places like Vietnam. The United States should never have fought in Vietnam. It was a foolish war. It had the war in Vietnam had hardly any implications for American security. But the reason we ended up fighting there is that we believed in the domino theory, which said that if we lost in Vietnam and Vietnam became communist, then Thailand would become communist, then Japan would become communist, then Korea would become communist, and pretty soon European countries would be communist, and finally the Americans, the United States, would become communist. This is the famous or infamous domino theory. And if you believe in the domino theory, you have to fight everywhere because you don't want that first domino anywhere to fall. So what you had was this global competition between the United States and the Soviet Union, right, that was underpinned by the domino theory, and that led us to get militarily involved, not necessarily to fight wars, but to get militarily involved all over the planet and to fight a handful of wars, some of which were unnecessary. I'm choosing my words carefully here. But that was nothing compared to the unipolar moment, which occurs after the Cold War ends and the Soviet Union collapses. So this is the period roughly from 1991 up to 2017. This is when the United States is fighting lots of wars, what we sometimes call the forever wars, right? And this is when many Chinese people get the sense that the United States does nothing but fight wars. Now, what's going on in the unipolar moment? Two things. Number one, the United States is a remarkably powerful country. By definition, if you're in a unipolar world, the United States is the only great power on the planet. So we are remarkably powerful and therefore free to use that power to fight wars in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. That's point number one. Point number two is the United States is a deeply liberal country, and its liberalism affects its foreign policy outlook. American foreign policy makers and many people in the American public believe that it is in our interest to run around the world and to turn other countries into liberal democracies, to make other countries look like us. We talked about engagement before. U.S. policy towards China was known as engagement. What was the ultimate goal of engagement? It was to turn China into a liberal democracy. What is the ultimate goal of the color revolutions that the United States has been purveying in Eastern Europe and would like to purvey in Russia? The ultimate goal of those color revolutions is to turn those countries in Eastern Europe and turn Russia, just like China, into a liberal democracy. So you see this liberal ideology that sits at the heart of the American psyche, right, gives us a powerful incentive to run around the world and do social engineering, to make the world over in America's image. And when you marry that fact with the fact that we are so powerful, it's not hard to see how we end up fighting wars to reshape the globe, to spread democracy, to spread capitalism, and so forth and so on. So what's happened in the unipolar moment, and this is again the period from roughly 1991 to 2017, is the United States got into the business of using military force in very liberal ways all around the planet and getting itself into a handful of disastrous wars.
So you talk about this liberal ideology. And there are a lot of other liberal democracies in this world, but no any other country is like United States. put liberal ideology as if it's a religion, it's a belief, and they want to spread it everywhere. Why?
Well, I actually think that after the Cold War ended, this liberal ideology took hold in Western Europe in a really big way. And I think the British, the French, and the Germans, and even the Italians drank the Kool-Aid, which is to say they firmly supported America's global mission. They firmly supported this liberal mission. So there was very little resistance from the Europeans toward this American policy of what I call liberal hegemony. I think the West Europeans bought on to that ideology. But the big difference between the United States on one hand and these Western European countries is that we had the military power to make it possible to think that we could use that force we had to spread liberalism around the globe. The British have gone along with us. The British help us, but the British don't matter much because they're militarily not very powerful. The United States is an incredibly powerful country. And you take an incredibly powerful country that has a messianic ideology, right, that is committed to spreading democracy, and what you end up with is what I would call a Crusader state. The United States is a Crusader state. But again, going back to the Europeans, they're our allies in the process. They go along with us. And you see this in Ukraine, right? The Western Europeans, and certainly the Eastern Europeans, are with the United States all the way.
And I think people somehow, what we heard from especially the Republicans in the Congress right now, they kind of doubt about this, like about like spreading. Can the United States really spreading this idea, like when the United States was unipolar power? Are people starting to doubt about this right now?
Very important to distinguish between the publics and the elites, number one, and to distinguish between the two parties. So start with the Democratic Party. In the Democratic Party, down below in the public, you have lots of progressives who do not like the idea of American primacy and the idea of using American military force to fight wars all over the planet. On the other hand, you have a lot of neoconservatives, right? You have a lot of people like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris who are deeply committed to American primacy, right? So you have inside that Democratic Party down below, right? You have a split, okay? At the elite level, the neoconservatives, the hardliners, the primacists, they dominate. And the progressives take a back seat. The progressives don't have much influence at the elite level, okay? So what I'm saying to you is, if you look at the body politic and you look inside the Democratic Party, you see that there is a real divide. You see the same thing inside the Republican Party, okay? You have inside the Republican Party lots of neoconservatives, right, who want the Republicans to continue to pursue a primacist foreign policy, who want the United States to continue running around the world, to continue acting as a Crusader state. At the same time, you have a growing body of people inside the Republican Party who want restraint, who are tired of all these wars. So again, what you have in both parties is a split when you talk about the base. But up at the elite level in the Republican Party, because Trump has been so successful, you see that at the elite level, that division is beginning to show among policymakers and leading politicians. You don't see that in the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is unified behind Kamala Harris. But inside the Republican Party, you have people like Lindsey Graham on one side and other hawkish Republicans, and people like Donald Trump on the other side. So you're beginning to see this set of differences that exist down below in both parties manifest themselves at the elite level in the Republican Party. And it is possible, and we talked about this before, if Kamala Harris loses because of the Israel and Gaza issue, that those progressives will begin to have a large influence higher up at the elite level.